Good evening and a warm welcome to all present here. It is my great pleasure to be standing here in front of you for the book launch of Caste as Social Capital by Professor R. Vaidyanathan. He will later talk about this book. I would now like to call upon Shri Nitin Sridhar to escort Professor R. Vaidyanathan to the dais. We will start our program with a devotional song by Kumari Ananya and Amulya.
Santatamaham kunjaramukham Shankarasutam tamiha Shri Vignarajam bhaje. Santatamaham danti sundaramukham Antakantakasutam tamiha Shri Vignarajam bhaje. Shri Vignarajam bhaje, Shri Vignarajam bhaje, hum bhaje, tamiha Shri Vignarajam bhaje. Sevita Surendra Mahaniya Gunashilam, Sevita Surendra Mahaniya Gunashilam, Japa tapa samadhi sukha varadanukulam, Sevita Surendra Mahaniya Gunashilam, Japa tapa samadhi sukha varadanukulam, Bhavita Suramani Gana Bhakta Paripalam, Bhayakara Vishangama Tanga Kulakalam, Shri Vignarajam bhaje, Shri Vignarajam bhaje. Shri Vignarajam bhaje. Kanaka Keyura Haravali Kalita Gambhira Gaura Girishobham Sushobham. Kanaka Keyura Haravali Kalita Gambhira Gaura Girishobham Sushobham. Kamadi Bhaya Bharita Mudha Mada Kali Kalusha Kantita Makhanda Pratapam. Kamadi Bhaya Bharita Mudha Mara Kali Kalusha Kantita Makhanda Pratapam. Sanaka Sukha Narada Padanjali Parashara Madaga Muni Sangha Salapa Satya Parama Janayana Pramuda Mukti Karatattvamasi Nitya Nigamadhi Swarupam Shri Vignarajam bhaje, Shri Vignarajam bhaje, hum bhaje, tamiha Shri Vignarajam bhaje, Shri Vignarajam bhaje, Shri Vignarajam bhaje.
Thank you, Ananya and Amulya. It was really mesmerizing. I know one of our highlights of the events is a song by Ananya and Amulya. I would like to request Shri Nitin Sridhar ji to introduce Indic Academy and our guest, Professor R. Vaidyanathan.
Just a short introduction to Indic Academy and what we do. Indic Academy is a non-traditional university for traditional knowledge. We seek to preserve, protect and promote Indic civilizational knowledge and values and build a renaissance around it. We have a multi-city presence, around 20 cities in India and some 10 cities outside India. We regularly conduct talks, workshops, retreats to promote Indic knowledge and also provide grants to various initiatives. So recently we did a retreat in near Srirangapatnam, 4 days retreats. Before that we did workshops by Dr. Bharat Gupta in Mysore itself. So Indica Mysore, this is I think 6th or 7th event in Mysore, and hopefully we'll be doing more and more events in future. Dr. R. Vaidyanathan is a retired professor of finance at IIM Bangalore. He is 2 times Fulbright Scholar and a fellow of ICSSR and visiting faculty at various universities at USA, UK and other places. And he has been selected by Business Today as one of the 10 best professors at all times in IIMs. He has the rare privilege of being in the various committees of the regulators like SEBI, RBI, etc. He is consultant to many organizations and is on the board of many corporations. He has been conferred Life Contribution Award by Asia Pacific Risk and Insurance Association and Kaibo Life in 2019. He has written 3 books. His book, India, Role of Non-Corporate Sectors in India, focuses on Indian and Asian value systems. It has been very well received by the planners and policymakers alike. His other book on black money and tax havens was well received as well. And today's talk, he will be speaking on his recent book, which is Caste as a Social Capital. He is on the Advisory Council of Vivekananda International Foundation and is also Honorary Dean of Economic Studies. He is a member of National Security Advisory Board under National Security Council. He is an adjunct professor of Auro University, Surat, and Cho S. Ramaswamy Chair Professor in Public Policy at Shastra University. A very warm welcome to you, sir. I request Padmavati ji to welcome him with a fruits. Now I request Professor Ji to address the gathering. Yeah, so we will have the unveiling of his book first, and then he will address the gathering.
Long holiday season, right? I also would like to thank Nitinji and Madam for organizing this at this city, which I would rather call the cultural capital of at least southern part of Karnataka, because people in Dharwad will not allow me there if I say the whole Karnataka, right? So we will keep it to southern Karnataka, right? Cultural, and actually I am always happy to visit such places. For instance, the type of invocation given here, I don't think I will be able to get in Bombay or even in Bangalore, right? These places actually resonate with a significant amount of what one can call, what Indic Academy stands for, and the type of programs they are having, another thing. And of course, the books he mentioned are all available there. I would of course encourage all of you to buy them. I am not asking you to read it, I am only asking you to buy it. That's enough for me actually, because reading is a habit which is going away, right? Not many people are reading. Writing has gone long time before. It's only typing now, not writing. My students, if I ask them to write something, they feel it is a human right violation, another thing, So no writing. They want just to tick, what do you call, multiple answers or type in the computer. So next is reading is also slowly going. Actually, one girl asked me last semester, sir, can you put all these lectures in audio form and give it to me? I was puzzled actually, because from regular lecture they went into this, what is that called, PowerPoint. Right? And PowerPoint also they told, sir, 3 points only you show, not more than that. And 4 slides only, all that restriction. Now audio, I asked her, sir, if it is audio when I am jogging or when I am planning to take bath or something, I can listen to your lectures. This is sort of a, so I was just thinking we are going back again to the old Shruti system, where this Upanishads and Vedas, I was told, all by audio, hearsay only. There is no written thing. So we have completed one full circle in terms of listening and understanding things. Anyhow, in case you are buying it, and if you are interested, I am there available to autograph it. I will sign it and go. Along with that, my friend Nitin's books are also there, actually. He has done an exhaustive study on the issue of menstruation. It's something very, very fascinating. After this, I am sure it is Sabarimala thing. It's a very exhaustive study of different cultures, different countries, different type of people. What are the various type of issues involved in that. So that book is also there, along with this earlier book on basic understanding of Hindu systems and others. So that also I would encourage you to buy and read it, right? Okay. Now this book actually, when I started it itself, many people are asking, like Madam was asking, what made you think of doing this book? So that is the first type of a thing. So I have been, what happened is somewhere around the 90s, if I remember, mid-90s, I had occasion to go to some of the locations, some of the places where actually people are involved in economic activity. In the sense of the United Nations Council says that there are something like 800 clusters in India. And actually, these clusters are clusters of economic activity in different places. And much later I found out most of these clusters are actually caste clusters, which has not been talked about at all in our discussions and other things. They are as if they are autonomous economic entities which have come up, like Swayambhu we call it, by itself, which is not. So I had occasion to visit couple of them, one in Tirupur, one in Surat. And then I was abroad. And in the west coast of US, I found that most of the small, what are called small inns, or they are called motels there, they are all run by Patels from Gujarat. And actually they are nowadays called Patels, not even motels. So that is the one group, small group, and within Patel, of course, there are Kadua Patel and Levu Patels, and Levu Patels are the more active in this, and practically they are controlling the entire motel industry in the west coast. And now they have entered into, from the motel, they went into this petrol pumps. Petrol pumps, they had this pharmaceutical and retail shops and other thing, and they have also gone into now this trucking, which is one of the major industries in US actually, and almost all is by this one community, and they get people from their place. Along with that, I also happened to visit Antwerp in Belgium. Then I found out that it's one of the major diamond centers in the world actually. And I was staying in one of those small hotels, 3-star or something. When I went to the dining hall, there was a board called Jain Meals. I was surprised actually. What is this? This is far, far away from India and Antwerp, and if there is a board vegetarian, that itself would have surprised me to start with, but this is much more involved in terms of Jain Meal. I asked owner, and he told they are our major customers here. So then I found out that a very small microscopic group of India, maybe 0.0001%, maybe Palanpur Jains, they control significant portion of the diamond market in the world today. In 1970, if you go back, roughly 70% of it was controlled by Jews, people of Jewish origin, and 30% by others. Today, 70% is controlled by Palanpur Jains and Patels, rest by the others. It's a matter of 40 years. Some of them originally had some diamonds, brought it to Surat, polished it, cut it, polished it, and other things. Skilled labor is available there because nearby Saurashtra there is a significant amount of drought and other thing, many people moved in. And then they slowly, instead of polishing and cutting, why don't we also set up shop in Europe? And then the Wall Street Journal wrote a very nice article quite some time before. The first time in the history of the world history, Jews were defeated in business without violence. It's a very, very interesting observation. Because always Jews were defeated, but with a lot of violence. Their shops were attacked, they were burnt and all that thing. But these people have come to such a... Then I had occasion to visit Tirupur, one town, many of you would have heard about it, near Coimbatore actually. It's one of the major export center for innerwear and hosiery and other things. The Tirupur. Then now today their export is of the order of something like 10 to 11 billion actually. It's a huge export market. At that time, around 2000 or something, I met with some of them, having turnover of something like 800, 900 crores that time. Today it is, some of them have got turnover of 15,000, 16,000 crores, which is much larger than many of the big companies in the country actually. And all of that is mainly by one group called Gounders in that area actually. Kongunad Gounders they call themselves. And again it was a drought prone area, and then they wanted to do something different, and somebody got this machine for making these hosiery items. Then they started on a small scale. Then they have, and entire amount of borrowing, lending, entire amount of capital, all that is within the community. Then I visited another place called Sivakasi, which also most of you would have heard about it. It's one of the major, now today more in the news because of all this pollution and other thing. It's a cracker thing. Originally it was a matchbox making. It was around 1934-35, there was a massive drought in that area, Virudunagar, Sivakasi belt. Two Nadars went to Calcutta, and then they were sent to Calcutta by a friend in Madras. He told them, why don't you go and join this Wimco? They are announcing a lot of job opportunities in the newspapers. You go and join. They went and joined. But Wimco was the only company that time. They learnt the art of the mixing the this powder and making matches. So they came back and set up a small shop of making matches. And the two Nadars. And then it got sold in and around that locality. Then it became very famous, and so many others. This became a huge business. Today roughly 60 to 65% of the matchbox thing is controlled by this group actually in Sivakasi. And they expanded, because they had access to matchbox, they expanded to firecrackers. What you may loosely call integration, in terms of forward integration. From firecrackers, because they were using large amount of the newspapers for packing and other thing, they went into the printing industry. They are the largest printing source in the country today, Sivakasi. They have excellent printing facilities. All these flex boards and the heroes welcome and the leaders thing are all done from there actually. Obama got 500 diaries exclusively for distributing among heads of state and various other dignitaries by him. 500 special diaries, and these diaries were all made in Sivakasi, not anywhere. And some of this is not even known to people within the... Then 2000 happened. I had occasion to look at the World Bank report. They prepare annual reports on world development thing. 2 pages were devoted to Tirupur. How the Gounder community, as a community, could develop that into a global hub or network, and how their businesses have expanded. And there were a lot of interesting things which we will in a minute mention. Most of these entrepreneurs are less than 10th class. Very important. As a management professor, I realized there is an inverse correlation between entrepreneurship and education at that point of time itself. More you get educated, more you are risk averse. You begin to analyze, you begin to build models and other thing, and then decide this will not work. And then, but these 8th standard people, they just, many of them I had interacted, interviewed, and he just told, we enter, sir, it's all right. He says, sir, can you be, looking at your theoretical model when you want to learn swimming? What do? What we all do, he said, is we jump into the river, that's all. Some of us get hurt, some of us don't breathe properly, we come out and then again we jump. So this is something very interesting, very low levels of education. And actually one of them, I can mention this, he regularly travels to Europe. He is in the Air France, he travels first class, not even business class. He is one of the highly respected customers. He wears ordinary dhoti and one time I was coming after attending some conference or something. I was in the cattle class, obviously, I am not in the first or business or anywhere near that, right? And I met him in the lounge and I was talking to him. He knows only Tamil. So his name is actually Arnold Arumugam, because he born on the day in which the fellow landed on the moon. So his parents thought better to name him. I asked him, you do not know English, how do you manage? He is running his turnover at that point of time itself was some 9,000 crore or something. So he told professor, you should know one thing. In France also people don't know English. So I enjoyed that response, right? So he says it doesn't really matter, actually. Because he says our language is language of money. We understand, and I know the texture, design, what they want, and because there is a lead lag, some of you may be knowing, for the next year's winter collection, this now itself they have to be working on another thing. So all this made me think, or rather rethink about what is the type of development which is happening in the country. So I decided, and then I got some funding and other thing. Then I traveled to large number of these clusters at Gujarat, Punjab, then Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, various type of clusters. And more I traveled, more I visited, more I was convinced that caste plays a very, very major role in these activities in some way or other. And it's not something which can be ignored. In all the period between 1950 to 1980, so many reports of Planning Commission never ever mention about this dimension of the economic activities being. They all talk about so many other input-output models and this and that and nothing. 87, there is one report about leather industry in Calcutta, wherein they highlighted about the Muslim role in the leather industry. And it also covered Ambur, very nearer to Chennai. Actually, it is on the Chennai-Bangalore route. Actually, there also, there they told the role of Muslims is very important in leather industry, because many of the caste Hindus do not want to handle this leather issues, and SCs are also there along with the Muslims. So this is the first time a community or a group was mentioned in our what one can call policy documents. Not otherwise. Then after that there are some more studies and other things. Okay. First we will very briefly introduce these issues of the caste. Alright. Incidentally, there is no census of how many people belong to which caste and other thing in India. In 1881, the British started the census in India, and that is the first time they wanted to identify people as per caste, right? 1881. And that is the first time also hierarchy was created. Before that there were a lot of caste discussion and other thing, but there was no proper hierarchy. It's sort of, this is number one, number two, nothing like that. It's all very, and many of these, much before if you go, many of the so-called, whatever we nowadays call in terms of backward caste and other thing, they were all actually the ruling caste. If you go back in history, 571 samasthanams, or rather the kingdoms, including this one, was merged by Sardar Vallabh Patel. And interestingly, all 571 were belonging to what you may loosely call today what are called backward caste. It is not actually backward caste, or the other word used for that is OBC. OBC or SC. Some of the kingdoms were also ruled by SC, STs. None of the kingdom were ruled by what is currently known as forward caste. This is something very interesting actually. So anyhow, the 1881 census, there was no, they started the hierarchy. British wanted. The commissioner says in 1891 census, the explanation is, in Britain we have 4 categories of people. Right? Civil servants who are senior, then middle level officers, then clerks and peons. So we also thought 4 is the best number to fix you all. So in the mirror image of UK, we wanted to create another system for India. That is the thing. And of course, a lot of discussion is about caste oppression and other thing. Much of it is, balloony. Much of it, because if there are really caste oppression, as Dharampal asked in his famous book on the trees actually, there should have been large scale wars in India, caste wars between Kurmis and Rajputs, between Tevars and Vaniyars, and all over the country there should have been massive amount of wars throughout the history. You look at Europe. Europe had only wars actually among various clans, groups and subsects. But I asked some good friends of mine in JNU, Marxist historian, are there any major caste wars in India? Right? Wars between kings were always there, but that is not caste wars. Explicitly one caste fighting the. So they have not. They told no. But I told it's very fascinating. India is a very peculiar country where 1,000 years people are oppressed, but there is no major revolt or wars, right? Except some skirmishes. That is also post-independence period, in the period of 40s and later. Anyhow, in 1881 we had 1929 castes were identified, and very interesting is there were 300 castes less than 10 members. Only 10 people rose their hand for that caste, not more than that. And much more interesting is there were castes in which one member caste were there. That's around 100 plus. That is only one fellow told I belong to this caste, nobody else told. That in mathematical we call it a set of one element, right? Ek, that's all. So 1991, these Britishers were not happy about it. They felt we have not done a. So what they did is, in the next census they asked the enumerator, you look at the fellow and put him in one caste. You cannot leave people at all. So catch hold of, pakado, right? If he is white face, you put him. Whatever you think, you put him into that caste. See, they openly say actually, they were putting it, and to that extent they wanted to enlarge the basket of, that is, they wanted everybody in India to be belonging to one caste or other. So don't leave anybody. So the enumerator, you can imagine the enumerator being given the responsibility, which is the most ridiculous thing, right? It's he would come and he will look at you. Okay, this man is with a mush, so he should be in this caste. This man is without mustache, so he will be. Whatever he feels, the local enumerator, he will decide. But this was going on till 1931. That was the last census. That is the last official data we have got on caste. Number of people in India, 1931, which was used by the Mandal Commission in 1981 to decide how many people should get how much reservation. That is based on 1931 census. 1941 there was no census because of the Second World War. So there was some small, not a big census. 1951, Nehru declared we have become casteless society. In India you should, I think most of you know, most of it is by declaration only, right? For instance, dowry has been abolished, right? All of you are smiling. I thought, don't you know that? Dowry has been Abolished. When? 63. We have laws against dowry has gone actually. So like that Nehru told there is no caste. All nodded their heads. So no more enumeration of caste. Many things we do by declaration. Right? Poverty has been removed, abolished. Right? Market economy has been introduced. Right? And somebody was telling in Bangalore potholes have been filled up. This is something. I don't know about Mysore. At least in Bangalore, I stay in one road called Bannerghatta Road. I do not know, some of you may be knowing about that road, right? 1980 onward, that road is in the repair continuously. Recently, I saw one contractor, one corporator, and one corporation official. All three were doing a puja on that road. I told, why are you doing this, sir? I asked. No, sir, you don't know, but for this road, we could not have become crorepathi's, each of us. Last 15 years, our children, we can put it into medical college because of this road. So, we want to give our pranams to this road. And we want this road to be renamed Kamadhenu Road. So, and this corporation, one minister in charge or somebody says they told potholes have been. So in India, mostly you should know many of these things are by declaration or assertion. That's all. So after that, you can't even question. We have passed a law in the. They may even do that actually in Karnataka Assembly. They may pass a law that there are no potholes in Karnataka. What do you do? By majority vote and democratically we have decided, sir, there is no. And why are you unnecessarily again and again? And they, if you say again pothole, they may even take you for contempt of assembly, put you before speaker and no. So Nehru told no more of this census. So the census was stopped. Then there is no data. So 1931 data only we have been using. And all the discussion you will find in television channel and this and that, these are all what I call POTA data, POTA, pulled out of thin air. That's all. You will just say, sir, Linkayats are very majority in this. How do you know? No, sir, we think. Another fellow will say, no, sir, not Linkayat. Actually, Idigas are more here. We should put a candidate like. All this discussion is based on purely hunch and surmise. There is no official data available to us. Periodically, of course, last 5-6 years, every politician want a caste census in India. There is a debate and discussion and other. So finally, 2011, we have annuals, I am sure most of you would be aware of it. 2021 is coming now. 2011 census, it was felt we should ask for a caste census. A big debate about it, another thing, it went up to cabinet. Finally, it was decided we will not be able to have it along with the regular census, but we will conduct a parallel census on caste. It was conducted actually. Some of you might have got visits from enumerators and not just caste, socio-economic and other conditions also. Like, do you have a fridge? Do you have a microwave? And all that thing was covered. This was for 2011 exercise. But there itself there was a lot of confusion. How to define a caste? You may all be smiling, but it's a very major challenge. Because each person perceives himself to belonging to, for instance, Jats. There is a community called Jats, I am sure all of you would. There are 403 subcategories. Each one feels that he is the only Jat. 403. Here I am sure in that recently, last year there was a huge debate about Linkayats, right? They found out there are 93 subcaste among Linkayats. This was officially, and of that 4 of them belong to listed scheduled caste communities. They are under reservation, but they are Linkayats. So how to define a caste? What is happening in the last couple of decades, 2 decades I would say, not earlier, there is an aggregation taking place in caste. Earlier there was a differentiation. Everybody wanted to be a caste within, Now they are all getting aggregated. In Tamil Nadu, there is a caste called Tevar in the last 15, 20 years. Earlier there was no Tevars. There were Kallar, Maravar and Agamudiyar. That's all. Now they have all combined together and calling themselves as Tevar. Like here, Vakaligas for instance, there is a huge, if you go back in 30 years in history, you will find so many subsets and so many subsects. Not all of them are agreeing. Now all of them are calling them. The reason is voting. Once the democracy sets in, people want to aggregate because it is much good to aggregate. For instance, if you call yourself as Linkayat, it is much more advantageous to have a larger network of people supporting your cause or reason or whatever it is, right? So the aggregation is taking place now. Compared to the earlier period in the 30s and 40s, where there was a differentiation. Everybody wanted to claim themselves to belonging to one particular group. Anyhow, 2011 was done. They ended up, that was a real big issue. What happened is, it is not yet been officially released by government. The enumerator went to 330 million households, 33 crore households. Household is as defined in the census data in terms of having a common kitchen and other things. They ended up with a list of 4.6 million entries of caste. 4.6 million caste entries they had. It's there. And that means 72 households used the same phrase to identify their caste. One caste, 72 households only on an average. This created a huge issue. And 65,000 castes are not able to be classified anywhere. There is another. So what does, I think many of you may be knowing by now, I am sure. What does the government do? Government did was, we will study this thoroughly. And they didn't release it. It's a very complicated thing. So they asked the new planning commission, most of you would have heard about it, Niti Ayog, to go into this issue. Niti Ayog collected all that and kept it. We are closely monitoring means what? We are not doing anything about it. I am sure you are aware of it, right? There is a heavy floods, sir, the whole village is inundated, everybody is dying. We are closely monitoring the situation. Ordinarily monitoring means they are looking at the television channel or something only. Closely monitoring is a very serious issue. They have just kept it. So this is the, what one can call, story of the recent attempt. Now in Karnataka, I am sure many of you might be remembering, there was a huge demand for caste census. Earlier, Channabasappa, there are a lot of other studies are there, socio-economic condition of Karnataka, on the basis of which all these categories of reservation were created in terms of, Schedule 1A, 1B and other things. In 2017, they attempted a socio-economic census in Karnataka. So, this Karnataka census was done and counting was also done and other thing. There is periodically there is a clamor to release that data, right? And the government is closely monitoring. They are not wanting to release that data. I can release it unofficially here. What is happening is, traditionally it is believed that Linkayat and Vakaligas are the largest community in Karnataka. This is the, what you may loosely call, belief, faith or myth, whatever you call it, right? And it's always claimed that Linkayat are 19% or anywhere between 17 to 19, depending upon which television station you get into. And Vakaligas are supposed to be 14 to 16. This is the, so these two are the, and anybody else getting into power and other thing is, very major. But this census, which was conducted, they found out SCs constitute 20% in the state and Muslims constitute 16.5%, 17%. It's a very explosive census. So if you add SCs and Muslims, it comes to 37%. Largest segment in Karnataka. not the other two which are, and they only make up, Linkayat make up only 13% and Vakaligas make up only 10%. So what was decided is we will closely study this report, right? This is, and this was even some people asked in the Legislative Assembly that this report should be released. They told, no, we will closely study this report and then we will take a decision on it. I don't think this report will see the light of the day. It will not, right? It's a very, and in India it is not, what do you call, any light at the end of tunnel. There is a tunnel at the end of every light. You should remember that. So it won't see. What I want to say is, it's a very cumbersome and complicated issue. Counting. It's very easy to say about, caste and. Second issue is, every caste is have their own sampradayas. This many people don't even recognize actually. They think, for instance, in terms of Namakarna, in terms of Mundaka, in terms of marriages, in terms of death also. Some caste do the end of last rites on 13th day. Some caste in India do it on 10th day itself. Some caste do it on 6th day. 6th day of the death is their last rites performed. And some caste burn, some caste bury, we all know that. And then this whole thing is not something which is uniform or which is coming over long period of time. We may call it, and food habits are different. And dress habits used to be significantly different. Now because of urbanization and other things, there is a lot of what one can call commonality in terms of dress habits. Celebrate festivals, of course, are different. Some stress on the festivals. So this is something which is very, very important. Once you say that we have to transcend caste, then you have to decide, can Government of India announce on the 5th month everybody should do Mundaka, for instance. There will be huge shortage of barbers, incidentally. It's not, you have to have something. You can't, once you want to have a commonality across the spectrum, then you must, then Namakarna. Namakarna, I think some of you may be knowing, some caste do the Namakarna at birth itself. Some do it on the 10th day. Some do it after 1 year. Till 1 year, this fellow is called Tinku or Diku or something. But they have fixed the name. They even tell the registrar this is the name. They give some amount to him and keep this name for this fellow. And that time we will. So different. We are not trying to say this is better method or this is bad. There is nothing called better or bad in all this, good in this thing. It's a system which they follow. So if you want to bring all of it into commonality, it's not going to be an easy task. This is a very, very complicated task. So one thing is to talk about, that all castes should be having abolished, all should follow the same. Nothing. It is not going to be a easy thing. Okay. But we have one economic census which is conducted regularly by National Statistical Social Organization, NSSO, under CSO, and it's a very, very exhaustive thing. They cover all what called entities. That is, one who sells idli on the street corner to the Hindustan Lever and Britannia. So every entity doing something or other business activity is covered. So this is something. So they have been doing very regularly. 1998, next was 2005, then 2013 and 2017 is yet to be released. It's a lead lag in terms of this. 98, they covered 30 million establishments in the country, doing some activity for money. Some activity for money, not donation or something. They included temple, mosque, church, everything actually, all 30 million, and 2005 41 million, and 13 it was 59 million. Now it is expected to be around 65 million. That's okay. More important is, in 98, 45% of all these establishments in the country were owned by SC, ST, OBCs. 45%. in 05, 51% was owned. 2013, 58% was owned. And it is estimated, not official figures have not come. Now roughly 65 to 68% are going to be owned by SC, STs and OBCs. So what is taking place in India, very loosely you can call Vaishyavization is taking place. Everybody is a Vaishya in this country today. All are into business activity. There is a Dalit Chamber of Commerce which is very, very active and powerful actually. They are consulted by the finance minister before the budget. There are many Dalits in south as well as in north who are running huge business enterprises. One of the leading ladies in Agra, she is Tubes, she is Kamani. She is sort of what, 650 crore turnover or something. Some of them are. They are into, Brahmins are into business very actively. The entire, for instance, in a sense, IT field, if you see, many of that were all started by. So all communities are into business. Kshatriyas are into business, and so it's very something interesting actually. Earlier, government used to be in business by and large. They were Vaishyas and others were not active. Actually, government role is Kshatriya, which they have forgotten. Hopefully now they will again become Kshatriyas, taking security and taking care of the country and other thing. All others are getting into, and there are cross currents. One is the traditional, Marwari and Chettiars. We all know, it's a large number of Gujarati business people and other. Then we have large number of agriculturists getting into active business, particularly say Andhra belt. Actually, lot of Reddys and Kamas went into business. They are very powerful. All these three-letter fellows, GMR, GVK, GRV, every V will be there in all the names. Venkateshwara that comes to. So that will be. They are building airports in Istanbul actually. So this is a very. They have gone into all type of construction infrastructure activities. They are very, very known actually. Similarly, I told you about Gaundars, told you about Nadar, told you about Patels, and there are Muslims in Ahmedabad, for instance. It was a 70 crore industry, this kite flying. It was small activity. Now it has become a, believe me, 1600 crore industry because it has been encouraged and it has become a international kite festival and people are brought to, look at our, that has become a very huge empire, and most 95% of it is by the Muslims. So various groups are now entering into, actively into business. Now what is the advantage of, the, what one can call the grouping or caste or something? Most important advantage is initial capital is provided by the community. 80% of Indian small businesses are self-financed or financed by the community, believe me. In spite of all this bank norm and all the big shouting, only 20% comes from institutional sources. If you go tiny, the micro sector, only 6% comes from institutional sources. I am talking about RBI data. 94% comes from own. So, initial capital is extremely important. Could be small amount, but still provision is there. Market access, that is another thing. Whenever market is expanding, for instance, in my city, the city is expanding, outskirts and other thing. Newer shops are established by people who are earlier helpers in current shops. They go and set up shops and so a lot of understanding intricacies of local laws and regulation. This is another very important thing. Otherwise, you have to spend a huge amount of money to lawyers and chartered accountants. But your community people tell you when you are doing business, this official, 500 rupees enough to bribe. Don't go beyond that. This fellow, 1,000 rupees. Like this very how to overcome the laws and regulation. Nobody can give you no business management school can give you any manuscript on this. No way. right? It's a word of mouth. Everywhere, all over the world, when you go to UK, USA, because everywhere you have to go by the local laws and regulation. That is one of the most important thing in the community thing. How they manage that. And local laws, particularly in our context, are all mostly state level laws, and most of them are draconian. Take my word, every regulation passed by government is a mechanism for making money by the officials. I am telling without any, even before retirement I was telling this, even now I can tell this, no problem. Any regulation means fellows can make more money. That's all, nothing else. So there is one regulation called Food and Adulteration Act. I am sure you are aware of it. Mysore also it is there, right? Fortunately, it doesn't cover households. I am very, thankful. Small mercies, Otherwise, every day, week, my wife has to bribe that fellow. He will come to my home and he will look at it. Oh, your cooker is not very clean. And then, Food and Adulteration Act is not applicable to households. Only to hotels. He will come and, everywhere you see in the country, this is unity in diversity. That I like actually. Whether it is here or Punjab, I have seen. One envelope he will keep, Friday or Saturday that fellow will come and he will give the envelope. That's all. Matter is simple. This is the way we have this Food and Adulteration Act. Very neat and clean. Nothing. I was wrongly put in a committee to review this act. People wanted to strengthen this act, and finally I was asked by that secretary fellow, Professor, what is your view? I told, scrap this act. There was shock all around. Sir, we have to strengthen. I told, how many people have died in Bangalore eating in restaurants? Adigas and Udupis. Give me statistics. One fellow told, no sir, stomachache. Stomachache can come even if I eat at home. There is absolutely no need for this act. Because enlightened self-interest. You tell me if one hotel fellow will give you any wrong food which will harm you, next day he will not be able to run the show. Because if word of mouth it will spread, and nowadays it will spread with all this social media. The girl, if she sees a cockroach in dosa, she will take a selfie. Cockroach, dosa and herself, all three. And put it into the, am I right? And it will go to Venezuela within a matter of hours. This hotel will have to close. So there is a huge amount of public awareness these days. And by and large, even the fellow who sells idli on the road, I am telling you, he is very concerned. He is not that he is 100% having hygiene and other thing, but he is concerned. He will not try to give you something which will harm, because tomorrow you won't get customers. Scrap this act. Shops and Establishment Act, another biggest possible racket. That says sunlight should be there in a shop. Have you ever seen any? Surroundings should be clean. I buy 15 years, I am buying bread for my dog every day morning. I go to the shop, give him money, he gives me bread, and in between there is a huge open drain. 15 years. That shop should be closed. And I remember a minister here told, we have to implement Shops and Establishment Act. 95% of the shops in Karnataka has to be closed. As I told you, by assertion, we have got Shops and Establishment Act. All shops are very, it should have a seating facility. Can you beat that? I can sit only on that rice bag or, on that cylinder he has kept. It should not have rats. You should read actually. It's a bulky one, not a small one. Bulky, exhaustive. So when members from Europe or US come, we show them this is the act. They are all very happy because in their country an act means which will be implemented. Not in our. Nobody thinks about, in chartered accounting even today, there is a paper called Banking Law and Practice. In all over the world, the paper is banking law. Here it is taxation laws and practice. Nobody has thought about it because our practice is totally different than what is told in the law. For that, your community or your caste is very, very helpful. Availability of labor, many people don't even realize it. Many of them bring labor from their own villages, their own community. And then they, for instance, retail stores in Bangalore, most of the Muslim retail stores, they have people from their locality in Kerala. Similarly, from Nadars in Tamil Nadu, they bring people from there. It's a very common practice. Availability of credit, that's a very, very important thing. NPA is practically low because there is a caste pressure. There is always a group pressure. So people lend it and he has to find ways and means to return it, another thing. Last but not least is acceptance of failure. That is another major. If somebody has failed, then others don't immediately put him under the bus. They try to help him, they try to find out in what ways it can. So, huge amount of this network is also useful. In Bangalore, and South Bangalore particularly, you cannot buy a bulb or a switch today unless you buy it from a person from Rajasthan. Very simple. You try getting it. No, I am all for local enterprise. Where is that? If I have to search for a Okaliga or a Ligayat thing, I will live in darkness. Seriously, I am telling you, try. They are all from a region, Mewar. They are not Marwaris, Mewaris actually. Over a period of time, they have built it. They have their sources, they have their access to what one can call these electrical. They are doing good. I am not finding fault or anything, but this is how the network gets developed actually. So this is something which we have to keep in mind. And these clusters have also got other externalities. Many of the places I visited, they have colleges run by these people, by the fellows. It's not just they have economic activity or anything. Of course, they have their own association and other thing. Many of them have built temples in and around there. They are community temples, whichever god they are into. Right? And they have large amount of other social activity in terms of playgrounds, in terms of, these are all developed in the local areas by them actually. So this is also, there are huge amount of externalities. It's not something to be. So by and large, caste in business unites. Caste in politics divides. I think this we should remember. If you are in business, there is huge amount of benefits and opportunities. And so there is much less of a division thing. But if you are looking at it from politics in terms of getting votes and other thing, that's a totally different type of a ball game. So there is a massive amount of work we have to undertake in order to establish this. And last but not least is, most of you would have heard about him, I am sure, Swami Vivekananda. When he comes from US actually, he does a lecture tour of from Colombo to Almora. In those days, it was a one country type of thing. It's not separate or anything. So everywhere people are enthusiastic in organizing his talks and other things. Because by then the name has spread everywhere that he has gone and done a remarkable job in US. So 1897, he is speaking to the Hindus of Jaffna. In those days, there was no, everywhere, there was no, what one can call, hide and seek. People were not, worried about telling that they are Hindus or anything. All places, Hindu Mahasabhas were there, Hindu Sangams were there. In Almora to Colombo, all places he spoke at Hindu associations, Hindu Sangams, Hindu groups only. Nobody was, we are not adequately secularized in those days, anyhow. So now it is a different issue. He says, the older I grow, that itself is shocking to me when I was reading, because he lived 38 years actually. When he says, older I grow, I cannot, imagine, because for us 50, 52 years also youth now, right? So around, right, 60 also youth, somebody told. So that's okay. So he said, the better I seem to think these caste and other time-honored institutions of India There was a time when I used to think many of them are useless and worthless and should be discarded. The older I grow, the more I seem to feel a diffidence in cursing any of them, because I realize each one of them is an embodiment of experience of centuries. This is something which it's a lectures from Colombo to Almora. I have given the exhaustive reference in the book. So I think it is important for us to realize that the caste has a role to play in the economic system of our country in terms of provision of capital, in terms of risk mitigation, in terms of market access, in terms of developing these clusters and other things. And to that extent, I think we require to celebrate the role played by them in enhancing. And these 800 clusters, they constitute anywhere between 40 to 45% of our GDP. And that is another important thing, which is not ignored or anything. So there I rest my case, and I thank you, of course, for being here on this Saturday evening, right? So wish you all the best, right? Is there any question, answer or anything?
Any question?
Of course, if there are very large questions, you can always buy this, right? I would strongly recommend you to buy my book, and I would strongly recommend to buy his book and read it. In my case, only buying is enough, right? Thank you very much, sir.
During the British Raj, when they conducted the first caste census, they were looking for classes, analogous to their system. But we already had the Chaturvarna. How they missed this point? We had the analogous.
No. They wanted it hierarchical, most important. Prior to that, there was no hierarchical classification at all in India.
Okay. Then my second question is how, because we all read and then we listen to the scholars like you, and then we also feel there was no hierarchical caste. But at what point in time of our history this dirty level of hierarchy came into existence?
British introduced it, and we have what one can call internalized it. That's all.
Thank you.
Interesting perspective on caste. Now I would like to thank Professor R. Vaidyanathan for taking out time to be amongst us. It is very kind of you, sir. Institute of Engineers has been very kind to provide us this venue. In fact, it has become a ritual to conduct all our talk shows here. Thank you, Institute of Engineers. On behalf of Indic Academy, I would like to thank our photographers, videographers, sound systems for being a constant support to us. Thank you. I thank the media fraternity for constantly giving coverage in the press. This is very much needed for our progress, as Indic Academy is a social activities is what we are doing here. My thanks to all of you in the audience who has been encouraging to conduct such, who has been a great inspiration for conducting such programs. Last but not the least, Sri Harikiran Vadlamani, founder of Indic Academy, for being a constant support in conducting such events, without which we would not have been doing such programs. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. Anybody wants to get their autograph? No. He's asking me to introduce our idli dosa batter. We have recently started our idli dosa batter manufacturing. So he asked me to bring the packets. If anybody wants to buy, you can go and buy it. Anybody wants to get the book's autographs can do it also. And we will also have a group photo here. And if anybody has not written their names and phone number, because we will add you to the Indic Academy group later, so that for all our future programs we can call you.